Welcome to our podcast. This is Friends on Fire.
I'm Mike. I'm a lifelong devotee of financial independence. I even wrote a book about it.
And I'm Maggie, a newer convert, but just as passionate, especially on the intersection of minimalism and financial independence.
We're one and the same.
We are two like-minded friends who believe that talking about money with your friends and family opens the door to financial well-being.
The Friends on Fire podcast is about dispelling myths, building financial acumen, and sharing your financial independence journey with the people you care about.
This is Friends on Fire.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, Maggie.
How's it going?
Great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really excited to answer some listener questions.
You sound excited. You sound thrilled.
Are you being sarcastic? This is my excited voice.
No, I am being sarcastic.
This is I'm like calm and mellow in retirement voice, you know?
Yeah, this is as excited as you're going to be for the rest of your life?
As excited as I'm going to get. Yep, I'm relaxed. No, have we done a listener question episode before?
I'm not sure we've done an entire episode about them.
Yeah, you're right. We would answer them in the beginning of episodes. In the beginning. Well, we could always go back to that. I forgot we used to do that.
Remember how we used to do Mike's Minute on the mic? And then
we used to do so many things. You know, we just sort of we just wing these.
Yeah, we're making it up as we go along in case that isn't clear.
Yeah, in case you haven't figured that out yet. I will say we get a lot of compliments that people actually, I think, appreciate the casual nature of these podcasts. So the making it up as we go along is working for us, I think. Okay, so on that note, before we jump into some of these questions, we have a quick favor to ask. Could you pause the show, go find us in the Apple Podcast app, and leave us a rating and written review? It really helps other people find our podcast. It helps us support the work that we are doing. We purposely keep this podcast ad-free for all of you. We don't love ads ourselves, and we do this as a passion project, but it really helps us if we can get more reviews and have more people find our podcast. And it helps our mission, which is to get more friends to talk about money and improve their finances. So we know it's a bit of time and effort from you, but for those of you who have the time to give, we would really appreciate it if you would. Before we get to some of our listener questions, Mike, I got the nicest note in Instagram this morning.
Okay, let's hear it.
I'm going to read it. I read it to myself, and then Greg was sitting by me, as he does in our retirement days. And I read it to him, and it was just it just made us both really happy to hear. And we had a moment of reflection that I've yet to share with you about just, this podcast and how much joy it brings into our lives, and hearing these sorts of stories and comments from people. Okay. So he said, "Hi, Maggie. I think people know that I'm behind the social account. I love that he just addresses it. Hi, Maggie. I'd like to share my story with you and Mike if he ever reads these. This might be a little too long. There's nothing too long for me. Don't say that. That sounds funny. Okay.
Oh, man. We are off to a rough start today.
Are you going to keep all this in? Okay. I started listening to your podcast about 18 months ago. My wife and I have been married for 8 years and together for 11. We've both been what my parents would call responsible. That was big in our homes. Work hard, do well, spend less than you make. At the start of COVID, we made the decision to move from Atlanta to Spokane, Washington. Spokane is much slower than Atlanta, and working from home for both of us has caused us both to reflect on our lives. Also, I'm now 45 and my wife is 43, and we've had a midlife assessment on priorities. We have 2 little boys who are 5 and 7. Your podcast has had a big influence on how we chose to design our lives. We were pretty close to 5 before we started listening, but I think what changed the most is questioning why we've done what we've done. While we've always lived below our means, it's also been that as we made more money, we spent more money without much thought. Bigger, nicer house, more expensive clothes, nicer cars. It just felt like this is what we were supposed to do. We made more so we could afford it. We still spent less than we made. But recently, I've realized I wanted a simpler life. We both grew up in a simpler time in smaller cities than Atlanta. I've also struggled with what we as a society and me personally were doing to the environment through consumerism. So we are also on a simplification minimalist journey. Our spend has come down by being more conscious. Our savings have naturally gone up. Our net worth is 40 to 45 times our annual spend now. Subsequently, I gave notice at my job, and my last day is May 20th. I'm calling it a sabbatical as I'm not ready to say I'm retired. I'll see how I feel in a few months. For now, I just need a break to decompress. My wife still enjoys work and will continue to work for now. For me, I'm going to exercise more, cook more, take more pressure off my wife. When push comes to shove, one person has to absorb more in a 2-career household. And she's done that for the last 2 years with sick kids, COVID shutdowns, etc. Thank you for sharing your stories with us. It's made all the difference. Thanks, Craig. There were so many, I'm like looking at your face, Mike, too. Like are you about to cry, Mike?
No, but I loved this note. I feel the exact same way. I think both you and I can very closely relate to what Craig's talking about.
Yeah.
I liked his term, a midlife assessment.
I liked that too. I like how he said that they had always been savers and that they were questioning why they've done what they've done, which is kind of where I was. Like, I'd always been a saver when I met you, but I wasn't as strategic as I could have been. And I didn't really have a why. I wasn't sure I was stressed out, but I didn't realize there were other paths in life. Yeah, everything they're talking about, bigger, nicer house, more expensive clothes, nicer cars. It just felt like that's what they were, quote, supposed to do. You know, like that we made more so we could afford it. And so we spent it. I love the story because it's so relatable and I think common, you know? And so it's funny when I replied to him, I was like, I don't know you, but I'm like really proud of you. You know, I'm proud of the decisions that they have made. And I appreciate you sharing your story with us.
Yeah.
And I did ask his permission if I could read it, by the way. So if you ever send me a comment, I will not read it unless you give me permission, with the exception of the fact that we're about to read a bunch of questions out loud, but they're all, we make sure we take out anything that's self-identifying.
Yeah, we will identify them by their social security numbers, which we will read out loud.
Exactly, which we require before submitting any questions. Okay, so should we jump into these questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, you gonna read? Are we gonna go back and forth? What do you want to do?
Okay, I will read some. This one comes to us from San Antonio. Hey, Maggie and Mike, I'm a new listener, but I've been binging on your stuff. So I've got kids who are 5 and 7. I have a question for you. So I was thinking about diverting some of the money that we've been putting into our mortgage, which is pretty significant, and we're significantly paying over every month, and switching and putting that into a 529, because you said it's a good idea to do that early. So doing that for like 3 or 4 years. So is that the right thing to do? A 529 versus paying off your mortgage at a ridiculously low rate of like 2.5%? Second question. I was going to put some of my cash into a brokerage account now, and I'm looking at the market, and it's just like it's going down, down, down. I know you said to start and don't wait on the market, but is now the right time to start? Or should I wait until it stops going down? So I'd love to hear from you guys. Very exciting.
Can we answer the second question first?
Yeah.
Because I just want to point to an episode we recently did, which is episode number 150. The stock market is down. What to do? To answer the second part of their question. Without going into detail in this episode, we literally just did an entire episode on no, you should not wait should I stop until it stops going down, because you can't time the market.
You'll never know.
Right? You'll never know. Yes, if you could, if you magically had a magic 8-ball, of course, wait until it stops going down and buy it at the bottom, but you can't do that. So we give a lot of great advice on dollar cost averaging and what we suggest you do in episode 150. So definitely recommend you listen to that. We will not answer all of these with episodes, by the way, but that's one that was like so specific.
And then on the first question about putting money into a 529 versus paying off the mortgage, it's sort of like combining two separate things. And it's hard to make a decision between the two without understanding the full picture. So I won't make a specific recommendation here, but I'll give you some thoughts. You're right. From a mathematical perspective, the interest rate on the mortgage at 2.5% is very low. And so you could be doing more in the market. In theory, if you think that the market's near its low levels, you could get in now and go make 30%. And that's much better than your mortgage rate. But paying off your mortgage would allow you to retire early, frees up a lot of cash that you could go do other stuff with. And then also think about like what you need the 529 for. Like, are you absolutely sure that your kids are going to go to college, that they're not going to be able to find a cheaper alternative? Are you absolutely sure that you won't be able to pay for this normally because you're going to keep working. I mean, there are a lot of questions which will determine how much you need a 529, and then you'd be able to evaluate if that is better than paying off your mortgage. I think the answer is probably there's like middle ground. Keep paying off your mortgage because that's great. It's just a great thing to do, but maybe try to cut some expenses in your life and put that towards your 529.
Yeah. I mean, what I was going to say, which is in line with your middle ground comment, Mike, is my answer is diversification, which is I would be doing a little bit of all of these things. So, right, he was mixing into, or he or she was mixing into that question also about putting some of their cash into the market, right? I'd be putting a little bit into the market, a little bit into the 529, and a little bit into my mortgage, right? And like you said, trying to also cut my expenses in the time we're in now to be able to put a little bit more towards all of those. Because, you know, that is a very low interest rate on their mortgage if they're at 2.5% right now. So, you know, even the mortgage I paid off was at 4 something. It feels a lot different than paying off something, you know, quite that low.
Right.
But I'll say, you know, when I was paying off my mortgage aggressively, I wasn't doing it at the expense of my 529. I was also putting money into my 529. So I was diversifying, and I was, you know, and I also made sure I had a, you know, cash emergency fund and all of that. Okay. Let's move on. Oh, speaking of emergency fund, that wasn't even a planned segue. Okay, our next question is from Lori in Atlanta, and she said, how much money should we keep on hand? We have a checking, savings, and money market account, but after listening to almost all of your podcasts, I'm thinking we don't need all of them, and certainly don't need the amount of money that we have in those accounts. I think I need to invest some, if not most, of that money into an ETF. And I'll say, Mike, one of the most common questions we get on social media or through email is how much money to keep on hand. Like, how much cash should I have, you know, in my emergency fund? Yeah.
There's really no good answer that applies to everybody. What you're going to read and hear from people is like, you should have 6 months of living expenses on hand as a quote unquote emergency fund. But like, just having the money is what's important. And so if you are investing that, then you maybe run the risk that the market drops and you need to withdraw some of it at a loss to pay for an emergency. But don't overcomplicate this too much. You certainly don't need a checking, savings, and money market account. You need just one, really. I only have one checking account and I have very little money in it. The rest I put into Schwab and go and invest. So I'd say 6 months. That seems to be like a reasonable answer. Maggie, I don't know.
I think most people say like 6 months to a year. I always liked having a year, but we also have pretty low expenses. So that's not the same amount of money to everybody. And I think a lot of it, I was answering this question to a friend recently. A lot of it depends on your personal circumstance. So for example, this person that I was speaking to had a really big family support structure and like safety net, if you will. So if they went a little more aggressive and kept less cash on hand and they really did end up in an emergency, they had a lot of people. I mean, their parents would easily, quote, bail them out. And I'm not saying like rely on your parents or somebody to bail you out. I'm just saying, you know, your situation, right? And if you have no help in your life, I think you should have a year, right? And if you have a high risk situation where you could lose your job, you know, at any moment and you don't feel like it, you know, has a lot of security, then I would aim for more. If you, again, so I think so much of it is personal, right? But if you have many other safety nets in your life and you know that you could pull money out monthly, not in large amounts, but, you know, monthly if you had to, then I think you could get by, you know, on a lot less cash. But, you know, I think from the angle that person's coming from, they should definitely be investing more of their money, or probably, you know, from what we know about them.
So we got a second question from this person. Do you put your tax payments in your spend tracker? Our spend in April is off the charts because of the tax payments we have to make. I'm going to give another kind of wishy-washy answer on this one, which I hope people understand, like reinforces the fact that this is all very personal to individuals, and just taking action is what's important. The specifics kind of work themselves out. So the purpose of the spend tracker is to help you manage your living expenses. That's the way you and I use it. So your taxes are different in nature. They are dependent on your income. So if you stop earning money, you stop paying income taxes. Yeah. But you still have to buy groceries. You still have to you have a place to live. And so that is the purpose of the spend tracker. But that being said, whatever helps you make better decisions in your life, with your finances is how you should use this tool. There's no rule to it. And so if putting your tax payments in there has these big swings year to year and you're like, this isn't useful, just take it out. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. I don't put mine in there. I never thought about it till I saw this question, but you're right. I didn't even have a reason as good as yours, Mike, which is it's dependent upon your income. It's not like truly a quote expense. It's not an expense that I have control over, right? I earn that money and I'm going to obviously take the money they want to pay me at work. And so, my taxes will go dramatically down in 2023. And it's not like it's not like I want to track that and compare of like, oh, look how much less we spent in 2023 versus 2022 because we're not paying taxes. But we also have no income. So to your point, it's meant, I agree. I think the purpose of the spend tracker is to show what it costs you to live. And taxes are so dependent upon, not so completely dependent on your income that, again, we don't track it.
Yeah.
But to each his own. Or to each her own in this case. Okay, let's read the next one. It is from Daniel. Hey, Mike and Maggie. I love the podcast and have binged. We hear the word binged a lot. Over 60 episodes in the last week. Wow. That's did you work that week?
For people who are interested in writing us notes, starting with a compliment like this will always get our attention.
Yeah. Maybe he took a staycation to stay home and listen to a stay podcast station. We should start that
station? I don't know. That sounds dangerous.
Okay, I love the podcast. I've binged over 60 of the episodes in the last week, and I've learned so much, and I've been able to start talking with my wife more about our financial goals. That's the part I love, that it initiated those discussions. One topic I'm not sure that has been directly covered that I would be super interested in regards to which accounts are advantageous to put my money into if I'm looking to retire early. A lot of the retirement accounts have early withdrawal penalties. And if I'm supposed to be maxing out my 401k, then there's little left over to grow my taxable accounts to make sure that they get to that quote 4% threshold to hold me over until those retirement accounts kick in. So I guess my question is how best to balance where my investable income goes now in my late 20s so that I have retirement income in my late 40s and into my 50s as I wait for the retirement accounts to become available without penalty. I look forward to Maggie's context and Mike's analytical answer. Great job so far on the podcast, and I'm kind of upset that I have to wait for Monday for a new podcast to come out.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you, Daniel. And Mike, let me let you start with your analytical answer, and then I'll layer on some context.
Okay. I have a very specific answer. I'm not sure it is going to be exactly what Daniel wants to hear, but I think it's probably the right one.
Well, that's a big question, too. That's not like a yes, no, do this.
You should always max out the IRS limits on your tax-advantaged accounts. Now, this is extra important if you want to retire early because you will lose your income and in some cases lose the ability to contribute to like a 401k plan with a match, for instance. And so it is extra important that while you are working and young, you are maxing these things out. If you then don't have enough left over to start growing taxable accounts, it means that you're a little bit further away from retiring early than you might want to. That's okay. But you will need to make a decision between two things, or to do both of them. One is to just continue working and earning more money or cutting your expenses until you can invest more in your taxable accounts and get those up to a point where you can live off them in early retirement, or use that money to start building up passive income streams like rental properties. But either way, it is not an either or. You need to be doing both. You need to be maxing out these accounts. And then once you get to the point where you have more money, then you start figuring out how to retire early.
So I think you said this, Mike, but the tax benefits of maxing out like your 401k has such a large benefit to you being able to save on taxes and, save 20, 30, 40% on taxes and put even more into your long-term savings. And then I'd layer into that, Mike, which we'll talk about a little bit more if we have time to get to another listener question on this, but there are ways to access your 401k before you're 59 and a half with this conversion ladder that exists, which we'll talk more about. But I just want to note that on this question specifically, because I think about the conversion ladder. I think about the income streams, diversifying your income streams, like particularly diversifying your income streams, like having a rental property or different side hustles or other things. And then another big thing I think about is that end of life spreadsheet that you talk about in your book, Mike, and I've been saying this forever, but we need to do an episode where we actually talk about this. It sounds very depressing because I think you called it an end of life spreadsheet. Mm-hmm. I have a version of it where I've literally mapped out from the current year we're in now all the way to when I'm like 90 something. And I show the age of my kids, the age of my parents, the kind of life stages I'll be in when my kids are in college. And I've kind of forecasted out like where I'll get money from, right? In those years, and you can, and how much money I'll have in my 401k when I'm, 60 and can start drawing from that and things like that. And so I just mentioned this to Daniel because I think it's hard to give a specific answer to this question without getting into your personal financial situation and the details of it. But I think if you do the effort to lay out those different income streams and kind of look at, like, I knew between my DCP, my deferred compensation plan, and my 401k, I could kind of map them all out and see how much money I had to live, and my rental properties, et cetera, see how much money I had to live on each year, and even play around with how aggressive I'm being on different returns. And what if we have, a bad few years in the market, like what we're having right now, actually. And so I would highly encourage you to start to map that out yourself and say, okay, I have this much. Yeah, I'll have this much in my 401k, but I have this much in, index funds, and how long would that last me? And what's my annual cost of living and all of that? Because I think that process is the answer to your question ultimately.
Yeah. Nice context.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Next question is from Noah. I'm looking for some advice on how to break up with my financial advisor. I've been with him since 2018. We seem to click, but I am not interested in the service anymore. How can I break the news?
Oh my God, I love this one. I already answered Noah directly, by the way. But I love this question because we have a whole episode we did, episode number 90, on why you don't need a financial planner. And I was like, I think I said I'm like passionately angry about financial planners. So I was really excited to see this note from Noah. And I'm not sure if our episode 90 inspired him to want to break up, but I just love it. What would your answer be? I feel like I'd do the like too long didn't read note to his financial advisor where I gave way too much context about why I'm breaking up with him.
Well, chances are this financial advisor has 300 other clients and he probably just doesn't give a shit. Honestly, he's probably not too concerned about one person. And it's like when we were joking, I remember specifically we were talking about our like how to return Christmas gifts, and you like to go to the Target return thing and give some whole story about like, the meaning of the gift. I like to let him know
about my experience.
And I just go and be like, I'd like to return this, please. Like, just be matter of fact. Just tell him like you're no longer interested and really appreciate the support, and then just hang up. Like I'm sure this guy doesn't care.
Well, it's funny you say hang up. My first advice to Noah was like, do it over email. Be brief. And like, I was like, you don't need to get back and forth with someone about it. This is not like if this was a real relationship, I'd be like, do this in person. But for something like this, I said, do it over email. Let them know it's no longer in your budget and goals. Be brief and firm, but kind. You don't need to, I actually did say you don't need to get into a long explanation. And I specifically said, do it over email and in writing. And Mike, I will say, just to wrap this topic up, now when I go to Target to return things, I often think of you and I don't say anything. I'll just say I need to return it. And you're right. They don't care.
They don't care.
They just want my little scan code, and I no longer give them context. And I think we're all happier as a result.
The world's a better place.
The world is a better place. Okay, our next question is from Jenny from DC. I'm a new follower. I'm learning so much listening to your podcast. I listened to your rental property episode, and I have 2 questions. My first question is, how exactly did you buy your first investment property? Were you single/married? How much did you put down? My second question, well, that was 2 questions in the first question. Whatever. Okay.
It's a lot of
That was 3 questions. Okay. I don't know why these are numbered, but my second question, would you consider running an Airbnb, or are there certain reasons you prefer renting your property out? Let's each go. You can go first.
Okay. So
ladies first, you go.
My first investment property was in Germany and with my wife. So we were married and we put down, I don't remember. It's higher in Germany. I think we put down 30 or 40%.
Your wife's from Germany too.
Yeah, she's German. Relevant. So this is not like an unusual thing. I have not considered Airbnb because it's just too much work. I mean, it sounds good in theory if you have like a hot destination to go get like $200 a night, but then you're turning that place over every 2 nights. It's probably not rented the majority of the month or the majority of the year. But like the amount of work it takes for me to go move somebody into a 12-month lease, if I had to do that every couple of days, oh my God, that is a full-time job. And so even if there was an opportunity to make more money from Airbnb, it is simply too much work for me to do. It is not worth the hassle.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that one. Okay. I'll give my quick answers on this. So my first investment property was actually Greg's first house. So it was a bit of like what I call an accidental rental. And I didn't even get involved. I mean, there were tenants in it. When we met even and got married and everything, like I never dealt with it. He had a property rental company. Is that what you call it? No. He had a property management company, and he had tenants in it for like 8 years. I got involved when all of a sudden he got a note from the tenants that they were moving out to buy their own home. And I literally had been there for like 9 or 10 years by then. And so then we decided to manage it ourselves. I saw what the guy was charging and what he was going to do. I think I've talked about it in some episodes. And I was like, I could do all this better. I was like, move, I'll take this over. And so I bought into the property with Greg. So, at that point, and also we then bought 2 properties together, more recently. And so we have 3 rentals now. And we put down, so that first one was like his first house. We actually did pay it off. The other 2 we mortgaged, and we put down like 20 to 30% down when we bought the other 2 rentals. So the Airbnb is an interesting question because we have been dealing with Greg's mother-in-law's condo as a short-term rental. And we have not done like Airbnb style. I still post it on Zillow and like neighborhood groups, but we've had people coming in for like 3 to 4 months at times. And the turn is a lot of work, right? Like Mike said, I mean, I prefer like 2-year leases on our rentals, and I don't want to, and I like people who stay long-term, right? I don't want to, it's just a lot of work to turn the property and deal with new people and to find good tenants. So it's like when you have someone good. And so the only way I would consider Airbnb is like Mike said, if it was in a very unique locale where to get the, most bang for my buck, I'm like, at the beach, and I'm not going to find a long-term tenant. I can get twice the rate for doing, week on, week off rentals, stuff like that. But I just, that's a full-time business, right? To be turning a property, and unless you want to hire it all out, and which a lot of people do. And so it's possible. It's a totally different style of business and approach than long-term rentals.
Next question is from Brendan. I would love to hear a more detailed explanation about Roth conversion and ladders. It seems like something that might come in handy in the next 8 years as I try to figure out how to make my savings last until Social Security can augment my nest egg. So Roth conversion and Roth conversion ladders is something that's very popular in the blogosphere of personal finance. It's not something that I think is a terribly good idea. I think people make it sound like it's some magic bullet, but let me explain to you how it works. A Roth conversion is when you convert a pre-tax savings account like a 401k or a 403b, and then you convert it into a Roth, and at that moment, it becomes a taxable event. You pay taxes on it. You pay income taxes on that amount, and then it goes into the Roth, and you no longer pay taxes on the earnings from it. That is the conversion part. Now, a conversion ladder is focusing on the rule that after 5 years, the converted amount can be withdrawn without the 10% penalty. And the way the ladder works is that you start converting money that you'll need and wait 5 years and then withdraw it. And so you create this quote unquote ladder of annual conversions that you withdraw 5 years later.
Yeah, you're planning ahead to be able to withdraw that money.
Yeah. Now, I think this is just like not a good idea. It is like a very specific situation by which this makes sense for somebody.
Yeah, I've actually heard you say this is a terrible idea. You were being like gentle there. Idea. Here's my view on it. And, granted, maybe a little bit of like less educated view, but I think it's an interesting debate, Mike. So the question from Daniel earlier, where he was talking about which retirement accounts to put money into and trying to plan for early retirement. Like he almost didn't want to put too much into his 401k. And you were kind of saying like, you're not going to love my answer, but it's like max out your 401k because there's a bunch of tax benefits to doing that. So I'm just using the example of someone like Daniel who is saying, or even myself, I have arguably too much money in my 401k. By the time I become 59 and a half, it's more money than I will need at that point in my life and how I've sort of forecasted things out. And so if myself or Daniel in his example were to know that they have a gap, Daniel was like, well, look, I'm optimizing for the future now by maxing out my 401k, but I have way too much money in my 401k, but I have a big gap between the ages of 40 and 50 and I would like to retire, or sorry, 50 to 60, whatever the age is. And I would like to retire. It is a creative solution for optimizing what you've got, or for working with what you've got, if that makes sense.
Yes. The specific situation where this makes sense for somebody is if you know you have way too much money in your tax advantaged accounts than you'll need, and you are relatively close to your retirement age. The way this comes up in blogs and other podcasts is that this is some silver bullet for early retirement, as though like this is free money or something like that. But you are taking your retirement money and spending it now. So not only are you depleting your future income, but you are eliminating the possibility that it's going to grow. There isn't some like fancy magic behind the tax conversion. Like you convert it, you pay income taxes on it, and then 5 years later you can spend it. The benefits of a Roth are that it grows tax-free. That's the only benefit to it. And so like you want it to grow tax-free for 40 years. If you let it grow tax-free for 5 years and then just take out the contribution, like what's the point? So I would just say, I mean, if you're considering a Roth conversion ladder, I mean, make sure you are under that very specific scenario. Make sure you have enough money in your 401k, because when you take it out and you spend it, it's gone. Like you can't put it back into your tax advantaged account. It's gone.
Yeah, it's a great point. But I mean, back to the end of life spreadsheet again, you should have a good view of this, and you shouldn't be relying on Social Security and other things that could go away or be depleted by, some percentage amount by the time you're eligible for it. And so, I think on all of this, I think Mike and I tend to both run pretty conservative in terms of, is conservative the right word?
Sure.
I think Mike and I both tend to run pretty conservative in terms of, even the 4% rule. Like I want to have more than that, right? Like I want to have, just extra buffer to protect myself from, unforeseen and unexpected events in life. And so, I think even in that example, I do agree. I mean, I don't think it's like as terrible of an idea as, or maybe not terrible or like risky, perhaps, Mike, as you do, but I like knowing that it's an additional option, that if I ran into some issues, that I do have more than I need in my 401k and that I could tap into it at an earlier age.
Mm-hmm. Now, the additional risk is that you are likely doing the conversion when you are working, which means you are converting it and paying taxes on a higher tax rate, and then taking the money out when you would have had a lower tax rate. And so just know that there is a cost when you make that conversion, and if you have $100,000 you want to convert and you're going to end up paying a 40% effective tax rate, you're only going to get $60,000 out of it. And then you better hope that it grows in the next 5 years before you can withdraw it.
Yeah. But like if I did it, I wouldn't be working when I did it. So I wouldn't be paying 40% taxes.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And again, I know it's an option for when my DCP runs out, if I needed to, which I don't plan or expect to, but it's like an extra, safety net, if you will, that is there. Or, well, who knows if it'll still be there in 10 years. Tax codes change. Things change. Okay.
This was fun. We should do this again.
Yeah. So I thought for fun, let's try to do top 3 takeaways on a Q&A episode.
All right.
Number 1, send us your questions.
Yes, we love them. Number 2, we're always going to answer them directly or in an episode like this. Sometimes they fall to the bottom of the inbox and it's going to take us a few weeks, but we will read them and we will respond to them.
Yeah, sometimes the more complex the question, the longer it takes for someone to get on it. Okay, number 3, if you do send us a really detailed questions, like sometimes people send us like lists of questions, it is sometimes hard, A, for us just time-wise to answer them, but B, when we don't know, we have a lot of like follow-up questions, right? So when we don't know your personal situation, it can be hard to answer things more specifically, which I know we frequently reference in a lot of our podcasts is, we're giving general advice, but the more personal and specific questions are sometimes a little tough. We have, just to, give you guys a preview into some things Mike and I have been talking about lately, we have considered doing some financial coaching together. I've done a little bit on my own recently and really enjoyed it. And Mike and I have kind of talked about what an offering and service would look like on us kind of tag teaming something. Mike bringing the finance, me bringing the fun. I don't know if people want fun in their financial coaching, but I'm going to bring it. But more like lifestyle stuff. And anyways, if we did do it, it probably wouldn't be until later this year after the summer. But I just want to mention that because if it is of particular interest to anyone, feel free to reach out. And if and when we do that, we'll definitely share more info.
Yeah. So thanks everybody for listening. If you've been challenged or inspired by what you've heard, please rate and review the show. You can also subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode.
If you have any thoughts or questions, we always love to hear from you, as proven by this entire episode. And you can leave us a voicemail or text us at 404-981-3370, or you can hit us up on Instagram.
All right. Thanks, Maggie. And thanks everybody for listening.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. Bye.
Bye.